My neglectful father and his manipulative wife tried to force me out of the house I legally owned just to hand it over to my spoiled, pregnant stepsister. When I refused, they actually tried to kick me out of my own home like I was some unwanted guest. My 34-year-old self, who has always known my 62-year-old father as stingy, self-absorbed, and generally absent, recently discovered his financial interest in my earnings. Surprisingly, this led to his decision to evict me from my own residence, all in the name of familial obligation. My stepsister, Ash, 29, often regarded as my father's faultless favorite, has unexpectedly become pregnant. Given her past self-supporting endeavors as an escort and an adult content creator, securing stable housing has become a challenge. Now, my father believes he must rectify this situation, and I am designated as the solution. Regrettably, I'm expected to surrender my home and the funds I've diligently acquired to this individual, simply because her choices led to her current predicament. For a long time, I was the son my father openly disavowed responsibility for. However, since he learned about my new home, my professional role, and, quite notably, my income, he has become remarkably keen on emphasizing our familial connection. While I'm not particularly thrilled by his constant reminders of our paternity, he also seems intent on strengthening my ties with his current spouse and her daughter, whom he refers to as Granddad. She is also his offspring, yet I was distanced from the family too early to establish any bond with her. Frankly, I'm relieved I didn't, as I imagine the disappointment would be profound. Before proceeding, I want to clarify that my intention here is solely to express my feelings. I have thoughts, opinions, and emotions that I need to articulate. They might not resonate with everyone, and some may disagree, but I'm sharing them regardless, as I genuinely have no one else to confide in. Now, let me introduce Ashlyn, or Ash, my half-sister. She's approximately 5 years my junior, and, astonishingly, she seems to be a source of paternal pride for my father. It's quite baffling, considering her profession involves being an escort and an unsuccessful adult content creator. Yet, my father regards her as his great source of pride. You heard that correctly. I suspect he's unaware of the reality of her activities. Who would even consider informing him? I wouldn't describe myself as particularly conservative, but I do strive to uphold certain morals and focus on my professional path. When time permits, I attempt to build meaningful connections with women. Sometimes there's a spark, but other factors, like geographical distance or scheduling conflicts, pose challenges. At other times, there's simply no mutual understanding. I consciously avoid casual encounters, believing it's important to await the right partner. The notion of a high number of intimate partners is frankly unappealing to me. I struggle to understand why some individuals boast about it, almost like an achievement. It's truly off-putting. This is the principle I apply to my own life. My stepsister, regrettably, holds the opposite view. She has likely lost track of her intimate partners. Her profession as an escort, in itself, is something I find distasteful. Beyond that, it also carries significant risks. Certain individuals can behave in disturbing ways with escorts. I can't comprehend why anyone would deem such work acceptable. Furthermore, she uploads explicit videos and images online in an attempt to monetize them, but she hasn't achieved much success. Perhaps she lacks the knowledge to generate traffic, but for some reason, her ventures have faltered. How am I privy to this information? Well, a friend shared an awkward anecdote. He mentioned that Ash contacted him after they'd met for a drink, inquiring if he was interested in having fun. Hearing this, I was already quite irritated because he had socialized with my sister. He claimed he was unaware of their familial connection at the time. While I can't confirm the veracity of his statement, he did mention she sent him a link to her page, which he subsequently showed to me. Given her consistent financial struggles and requests for money from our father, I deduce her ventures aren't thriving. I couldn't bring myself to confront her directly about it, nor did I ever disclose it to our father. On another occasion, I observed her taking a phone call, then getting into a car with an older gentleman. He presented her with flowers before they drove away. She would frequently re-enter the house discreetly through a window at unusual hours. I noticed this pattern during my college breaks when I returned home for holidays. I'm uncertain if she continues these activities, but I wish to distance myself from them entirely. I hold a respected position in my workplace, and I value my professional standing. I haven't spent extensive time with this new family, as my father consistently sought opportunities to send me away. However, I've observed Ash closely enough to confidently state that she strongly resembles her mother, Marissa, 58. Marissa considered herself quite the personality in her prime. She was formerly a flight attendant and evidently attractive to men like my father, who had a penchant for womanizing. Now, she presents as a rather typical, overtly cosmetically altered individual, if you understand my meaning. With her long, almost claw-like nails, she manages a local childcare facility. It's rather odd that parents would entrust their children to someone resembling Edward Scissorhands. She could inadvertently injure a child with those elongated nails. In any case, her personality is as sharp as her nails. She holds an opinion on everything and seems to relish creating difficulties in others' lives. Her voice is rather unpleasant, and she appears to have more artificial enhancements than a body of water. She possesses the authenticity of imitation leather. She exerts a detrimental influence on my father. I believe she was a primary factor in my father's decision to dispatch me to boarding school without hesitation when I was 8, simply because she had no desire to raise a child who was not her own. Now, regarding my father, he's truly at the core of all these complications. He firmly believes that all his actions are justified, even when they are unequivocally far from it, simply because his extensive life experience supposedly grants him superior wisdom. He claims to regret my existence because I bear no resemblance to him, and for that, I am truly grateful. My mother was a formidable woman. She understood her priorities and cared deeply for my father, but their relationship eventually fractured. She always assured me that my father wasn't inherently bad, merely different, and that regardless of circumstances, he would always be my father, a truth I should never forget. She was a kind soul and certainly didn't wish to instill any negativity toward him in me. I'm convinced he was as challenging for her then as he is for me today. They separated and divorced a few months later, when I was 4 years old. Just 2 months after the divorce, my father married Marissa. Ash was born when I turned 5, and then, tragically, my mother died in a car accident. I cannot erase the memory of it because she was on her way to pick me up from school. She was always punctual, but that one day, she was 10 minutes late. To me, it felt like an eternity. But it was just 10 minutes. She was struck at an intersection by a drunk driver who survived, while she did not. He received a DUI conviction years later, and I was left utterly alone. I waited at school, and it took 2 hours for someone to finally arrive for me. I was met with deception and confusion when my father appeared. I'll never forget his clear annoyance as he glanced at a visibly unconcerned Marissa and asked what they should do about me. Her response was direct: "Your child, your problem." And that, my father, is precisely the point. You cannot now demand that I take responsibility for your pampered child. I have finally established a stable career and manage a few minor ventures on the side. I've dedicated myself to hard work since the age of 15 and have been financially independent since. After boarding school, I attended college, returning home only for holidays, meaning I've been self-sufficient since I was 8. Significant effort has brought me to my current standing, and I recently acquired my own home. It represented a pleasant, modest place, a definite improvement over the shared apartment I had with friends. It was a life ambition I once believed unattainable. The thing is, I had only just moved in last month. While my affection for my family may be limited, I felt basic decorum necessitated involving them in such a significant milestone, so I extended an invitation to my housewarming. My father's reaction was disheartening to observe. To be candid, he seemed envious, even a little irritated, as he inquired about the furnishings, the architect, and the interior designer. I provided what I considered sufficient information, to which he responded with cynical remarks, like, "I wouldn't know, you never bothered informing me," seemingly attempting to draw attention and highlight our strained relationship in front of my friends and even my boss. A week later, I received an urgent call from him while I was at work, managing a complex project. I agreed to meet. Upon returning home, I found a furious Marissa and a tearful, red-eyed Ash giving me a sidelong glance from the living room. My father was in the kitchen, retrieving beer bottles from the refrigerator. He offered me one, which I politely declined, apprehensive of his impending words. I asked him why he wanted to see me, and he raised his eyebrows, countering with another question: "Have you finally begun to care about us?" I furrowed my brow in confusion, unable to grasp his implication. He then instructed me to join Ash and Marissa in the living room. I nodded and seated myself on a couch opposite them. Ash crossed her arms, and Marissa rolled her eyes. My father entered and sat facing me, placing his beer bottle on the coffee table before leaning back. He then asked if I was blind. A silence followed, filled with my confusion and, likely, their frustration. Before I could respond, he added that I was either blind or deliberately chose to ignore what needed to be seen. He asserted that my acquiring a home had made me overly proud, causing me to disregard those who genuinely matter. I sighed, asking him to clarify his meaning and to be more direct. He let out a sarcastic huff, then accused me of being unconcerned by the gravity of the situation in the room. He stated that I had deliberately chosen not to acknowledge the family's peril and had not offered any assistance whatsoever. Naturally, I asked what jeopardy he was referring to. He looked toward Ash, who rolled her eyes and declared she was pregnant. Like any rational person, I intended to congratulate her, but before I could, she began to cry. Marissa embraced her, telling me I should be aware of domestic affairs and care enough to inquire. My father explained that Ash had just discovered her pregnancy and that the individual responsible had subsequently ended their relationship. Marissa interjected that Ash had decided to carry the pregnancy to term, and that this decision should guide our subsequent actions. All I could manage to utter was, "Can she afford it?" I was met with a furious glare from both Ash and Marissa. Though I genuinely meant well, it was a legitimate concern. In my mind, I had already considered that they might seek financial contributions, and I was prepared to assist. However, my father then rose, approached my side, and sat beside me. He explained that this was precisely why he had summoned me. He claimed to be a good father to his daughter and suggested that perhaps my mother had not instilled in me the virtues of brotherhood, emphasizing that brothers would readily sacrifice their lives for their sister's well-being. I was utterly bewildered. While I understood my financial contribution might be required, I certainly wasn't prepared to die for her. I sighed and asked what he expected me to do. He smiled, patted my back, and said, "That's my good boy." I offered a feigned smile, which vanished the moment my father uttered his next words. "You are giving your house to Ashlyn." "No, I am not," I immediately retorted. "Yes, that's what I said," he insisted, a frown quickly forming on his face. He asked why not, so I explained that I could provide some monetary assistance, but the house belonged to me. I offered to let her stay in a room rent-free until she can manage her own expenses. My father abruptly stood and vehemently exclaimed, "Nonsense." To me, it made perfect sense, but he insisted that I not only surrender the house to her, but also vacate it and purchase another for myself. I countered that Ash couldn't even afford the utilities or manage a household, especially while pregnant and unemployed. My father then informed me that those responsibilities would also fall to me. Excuse me? Absolutely not. I was incensed, but felt compelled to maintain some semblance of respect. So, I rose and calmly stated that his demand was impossible and that I was leaving. And then, I left. He didn't stop there. A week later, he appeared at my house while I was at work. I have no idea how he gained entry or where he obtained the keys, but upon my return home, I discovered men moving boxes of my belongings outside. I rushed in, demanding to know what they were doing, and they informed me that the homeowner had instructed them to remove the items. I vehemently stated that I was the homeowner and ordered them to return my possessions and depart immediately. I lost my composure. This was the absolute last thing I expected to encounter upon arriving home. Inside, I found my father and Ash, still there, persisting in their demands that I fulfill a brother's supposed duty. I told them to leave, but they refused to listen. It was only when I threatened to contact the police that they finally relented and left, spewing insults and profanities as they went. I understand this is a considerable amount to read, but the real-life experience was infinitely worse. A week has passed, and I'm experiencing a degree of remorse, which is why I'm sharing this. Was I in the wrong? Part of me feels they need me and that I shouldn't sever ties so abruptly, but I also believe there are clear boundaries to what I am willing to do for them. It infuriates me how detached and uncaring they were during my upbringing, yet now they expect me to utterly sacrifice myself for their sake. It seems rather excessive, don't you agree? Please let me know your thoughts. I can't even discuss this with my friends. You all are my sole confidants at this moment. Update. Hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. It's been a week since my last post, and frankly, I was surprised by the amount of attention it received. Reading the comments prompted me to reflect on many aspects, but ultimately, I decided not to completely sever ties with my family. This decision stemmed from a call I received from Ash. She expressed a desire to meet, and I agreed. She initially suggested meeting at my house to share some information, but still recovering from the previous contentious encounter there, I insisted we meet elsewhere. We opted for a coffee shop. Initially, she seemed quite anxious, which was uncharacteristic of her usual arrogant and impolite demeanor. We found a secluded corner, and she began by telling me about her recent breakup. I responded, indicating I had some understanding, as Dad had mentioned her pregnancy had caused her boyfriend to leave. She shook her head, clarifying that this was merely Dad's perception. I then asked her what the true circumstances were. She explained that Dad believed her boyfriend had commitment issues, but in reality, she was the one with the commitment issues. Quite a revelation, wouldn't you agree? She confessed that she genuinely cared for this individual, but he had uncovered some unsettling details about her just days before she broke the news of her pregnancy to him. When they met, he intended to confront her about these matters, but she spoke first, which only further infuriated him. In that moment, he became quite agitated and even punched a hole in the wall. She described him as frightening. Then he told her he was ending their relationship and left without hearing her response. She has been trying to contact him incessantly, but he hasn't responded at all. He only texted her once, stating that she needed to terminate the pregnancy first, and only then would he consider speaking with her. So, she has to end the pregnancy to even have a chance at a conversation. Now, while I acknowledge Ash is no saint, I certainly do not care for this individual. I merely inquired about the things he had discovered, and she replied it would be awkward to discuss them with a brother. I somewhat inferred she was referring to her adult content creation and escorting, so I simply shrugged and conveyed that it was fine if she preferred not to elaborate. Before I could ask why she had wanted to meet, she took a deep breath and released it, then revealed she had been involved in shady things. I felt a pang of apprehension, as I didn't truly wish for confirmation of my suspicions, but I listened. She explained that she had initially aspired to be a painter and an artist, but Marissa had dissuaded her, arguing it wouldn't provide a comfortable living or sufficient income. Ash was instead advised to secure a male partner as quickly as possible. Before long, she began attracting the attention of older men, which initially made her uncomfortable. When she confided in Marissa about this, Marissa told Ash that it was a positive development, as older men were indeed the ones with financial means, and they were the ones who generated any income. Ash was only 19 at the time, and Marissa asserted that a college education wouldn't, or couldn't, guarantee a comfortable life. Marissa emphasized that Ash possessed youth, and there were many who would pay for that. Ash then decided she wanted to pursue modeling. She approached numerous modeling agencies, but none showed any interest. Then she met a man in his 40s who claimed he could secure her a gig. He took her to parties, buying her expensive clothing and jewelry for these events, and she was content until she was informed about her first gig. It turned out she was expected to exchange her time for a modeling opportunity. She had anticipated a dinner, but it became an entire night, which she spent. She did manage to secure a minor modeling assignment, where she photographed for a small brand, but that was the extent of it. Several other men exploited her with promises of modeling work in return, only for her to be told she hadn't been selected. She eventually discovered that the man who had been investing in her was, in fact, selling her services and profiting from her. She deemed it unwise to confront him, fearing for her safety, so she informed him she no longer wished to pursue modeling and was content with minimum wage employment. Thankfully, he allowed her to leave without incident. She then attempted to work as a waitress in bars, which proved quite challenging for her. That, Ash, is what truly defines hard-earned money. Regardless, she also recounted that Marissa would humiliate her for choosing such modest jobs, lecturing her that women are the world's inherent beauty and should exist merely to radiate charm and grace, like ornaments, deserving of meticulous care. Consequently, Ash began to socialize with men exclusively for dinner, but she charged a fee for these encounters. She found that many lonely individuals simply desired conversation. However, this path also led to issues with stalkers and obsessive men who felt entitled to more than what they had paid for. She concluded that engaging in conversations and fostering emotional connections with men was more problematic than simply having physical encounters, so she shifted to escorting. This worked adequately until a friend introduced her to the adult content platform. She attempted to establish herself there, but she wasn't proficient with camera work or editing, lacked sufficient social engagement, and it required a substantial amount of effort, so that venture also failed. Then, she met her current boyfriend, a former co-worker from a barista job, and they reconnected. She developed strong feelings for him, but he proved excessively clingy and somewhat possessive, with a notable lack of trust in her. Admittedly, he had every reason to be suspicious, as she was still engaged in adult content creation and escorting without his knowledge. She completely ceased her adult content and escorting activities, and her boyfriend began to support her with his modest income, which she found acceptable. Marissa, however, was displeased. Subsequently, she became pregnant, and her boyfriend discovered everything. She stated that she has several men who could potentially be the father, and they all contribute financially to support her and the child. One of them had even proposed marriage. She is aware that all of them contribute under the assumption they are the sole father, which she finds ludicrous, given they know she is an escort, but she avoids explicitly confirming it. This arrangement, she says, covers her expenses and will likely aid with the child. She explained that she chose to confide all of this in me because she couldn't tell Dad. Dad believes she has only been involved in minor modeling, earning little, and that she had one partner who abandoned her when he should have remained. Marissa is aware of most of it and suggests Ash marry the proposing man and let him believe he is the father. However, Ash doesn't know how to explain this to Dad, and she also doesn't wish to marry the man because he is peculiar and elderly, and she doesn't want to perpetuate a falsehood. I asked her how she expected me to help, and she replied that some financial assistance would be beneficial, and she wanted me to reconcile with Dad. She suggested that I agree to Dad's demands and move out temporarily, then return when tensions had subsided. I found this to be an unacceptable solution. I respectfully declined her proposal and reiterated that I could only provide some cash, but I was unwilling to vacate my own home. She then accused me of being selfish from my perspective, arguing that she had revealed her entire life to me, and I lacked the slightest decency to assist her even then. She concluded that Dad was correct about me and that I deserved to have been sent to an orphanage instead of being taken in when I needed a place to live. She then stood up and stormed away. I don't believe my response was overly extreme, but was it truly selfish? What are your thoughts on her side of the story? Does it justify her demands? Should I trust her? I feel like she was being truthful, but does that mean I should comply with her requests? Let me know, everyone. Update. This situation has truly been consuming my thoughts. Another week has passed, and several new developments have occurred. I wanted to take a moment to provide an update. Thank you all for the tremendous support on my previous post. It was a profound relief to have people validate my perspective for once. After my meeting with Ash, I received a call from Dad. He wanted to meet at a bar to discuss and resolve a few matters. Intrigued, I agreed and went to meet him. We sat at the counter, and he immediately stated that he was aware of my earnings. I questioned the relevance of this, and he responded by asserting that he knew I could afford to purchase another house within a few years. I shrugged, reminding him that I already possessed a home and that this discussion should conclude. He, however, insisted that I did not yet have a family, and that it was more challenging for women to raise a child independently, emphasizing the child's need for a stable home environment. I then reminded Dad that Ash had resided with them for an extended period and no issues seemed to arise. A baby shouldn't alter that. I also inquired what she would do living alone in an entire house while pregnant, suggesting she needed to be surrounded by people for care. It was then that Dad delivered another shock. He declared that he and Marissa would move in with Ash in my house. I was utterly dumbfounded. Before I could even react, the bartender let out a sarcastic chuckle. Dad took offense and demanded to know what was so amusing. Ash, the bartender simply replied. He elaborated, stating that she exploits everyone and then discards them. My father, with a clenched fist, sternly asked if he knew whom he was speaking about. The bartender nodded, identifying himself as Ash's boyfriend. My eyes widened. So this was the man. Dad tightened his fists further and spoke sharply to the bartender, asking why he thought it was acceptable to start a family he couldn't support. The bartender held up his hands, clarifying to Dad that he was not responsible for the family in question, and furthermore, he had no desire to raise a child that was not his own. Dad challenged him to explain why he believed that. The bartender then smiled and informed us that he had undergone a vasectomy last year, as he had no wish for children, yet Ash still became pregnant. He also revealed that he had discovered her driving off with various men after lying about her whereabouts. Then, he learned about her adult content creation. He confessed he had been reluctant to believe any of it, until Ash finally told him they were expecting a baby. That, he said, was the ultimate breaking point. Since he couldn't father a child, it confirmed everything. He told Ash she had been deceiving him all along, and he knew it, at which point she confessed completely. All I could do was observe Dad's face morphing from anger to shock to profound disappointment, while my attention remained fixed on the bartender's voice. He shrugged, stating that he owed Ash nothing. Rather, she owed him money, time, sincerity, and, at the very least, love. He concluded by saying he wasn't sure if Dad was aware of any of this, but he was certain no father would be proud of a child like that. Dad tightened his lip, silently dismounted the stool, and walked away. Later that evening, he texted me, saying he had to pick Marissa up from her yoga class. I'm uncertain what transpired after that, but I'm convinced something significant occurred, because the very next day, I found Ash weeping at my door. She accused me of ruining everything. I pulled her inside to prevent a public scene and calmed her enough to explain that I hadn't told Dad anything. It was her boyfriend, who happened to be the bartender at the place Dad and I had visited. She then informed me that Dad had ordered her to abandon all her current activities and remain at home. He expressed his disgust with her, stating he never imagined she would resort to such practices. He told her to amend her behavior and find a respectable man, also pointing out that her prospects of finding such a man were now quite slim. I listened to her, offering a comforting embrace. She apologized for blaming me, explaining that Dad had confronted her immediately after returning from our meeting. I forgave her, and she subsequently returned home. While she was lamenting and describing her profound sense of shame, She mentioned that Marissa had remained conspicuously silent when Dad was discussing virtuous women and their fidelity, as if Marissa herself had nothing to say. Ash implied this was one of the topics Marissa couldn't speak about. I asked her to elaborate, and she responded that Marissa couldn't offer an opinion because she is yoga. I could only furrow my brow in confusion before Ash continued her tearful narrative of other events. Yoga, that phrase lingered in my mind. What do you all think truly transpired? Will Ash still be her father's pride? No one has contacted me since then. I'll await further developments and keep you informed. I know you probably didn't anticipate such a swift update, but I couldn't resist. Update. Just 2 days after my last submission, I'm back with another update for those inquiring. Ash's ex-boyfriend's name is inconsequential, but for convenience, we can refer to him as Bob. Here's the latest development. The day before yesterday, I met with Dad. I informed him of certain decisions I had made. I stated that I was willing to help raise Ash's child and was prepared to offer her a room in my house. I would even contribute financially for necessities like diapers, provided she secured employment as soon as feasible. Dad countered that this would leave no one at home with the baby, so I suggested she explore freelancing or remote work options. Surprisingly, Dad was not his usual abrasive self this time. He paused, then sighed, sinking onto the couch. He admitted he believed I harbored resentment towards him. He was right, but I asked him why he thought that. He attributed it to Mom's supposed animosity toward him. I quickly corrected him, emphasizing that she never conveyed such feelings. She consistently told me Dad loved and cared for me. I explained that my only disappointment stemmed from the stark contrast between Mom's portrayal of Dad and the reality of his profound neglect and lack of concern. He rubbed his eyes, confessing that he regretted many things. He admitted he liked Mom, but they hadn't known each other long enough to determine if they were truly compatible. He sighed, explaining that her pregnancy necessitated their marriage. She was a good wife, he conceded, but the emotional connection was never truly present. Then, he met Marissa. At this revelation, I felt an internal tremor. I was frozen, completely unaware of this history. Dad continued, stating that Marissa ignited a passion within him he never knew existed. He was immensely happy with her, and before he fully comprehended the moral implications, he developed deep feelings. Before he could navigate the complexities of right and wrong, Marissa also became pregnant. He then confessed to Marissa that their relationship was improper, but it was too late. She was already pregnant. He told her to wait, as he wanted to inform Mom first. However, Marissa felt insecure and came directly to our house, disclosing everything to Mom. Mom confronted Dad, and he acknowledged his actions. It was an incredibly painful episode for Mom, yet even amidst her anguish, she remained composed and requested a divorce. So, everyone, my parents divorced because Dad had an affair with my stepmother and got her pregnant. I honestly question how much worse this man's actions could become. Dad paused, looking over at me. He recounted that he had enjoyed a comfortable year with Marissa until Mom's passing, which necessitated my return home. Marissa, however, despised every aspect of it. She became insecure again, fearing that Dad might prioritize me over their unborn child, perhaps out of guilt or some other reason. Consequently, 3 years later, he sent me away to boarding school, ensuring I never had to remain at home long enough to cause Marissa any discomfort. Love makes you do stupid things, he mused, and in that moment, I yearned to strike him, but I managed to restrain myself. I turned to see Marissa standing in the doorway, water bottle in hand. She announced she was leaving for her yoga class, placed her bottle on the table, and entered the kitchen. I blinked, and before I could fully process, she was back, heading out the door. Feeling numb, I followed her. I picked up her water bottle to return it, but by the time I exited, she was already in her car, driving away. I needed to clear my head, so I quietly entered my own car and followed her. She parked outside a yoga club and exited. She looked around, then began walking into an alley. She again glanced around before entering another car. She embraced and kissed the driver, and they drove off. I could barely blink. I clenched my jaw, parked my car, and entered the yoga club. I inquired about Marissa checking in, but they refused to provide personal information. I expressed my concern for her and insisted they at least confirm if she was there. They informed me they had no client by that name. I returned to my car and waited. I'm not sure what compelled me, but when that other car reappeared, I began recording a video. A man exited, opened the door for her, embraced and kissed her, then playfully slapped her behind as she cheerfully made her way toward the parking lot. So much for yoga, Marissa. Before she reached the parking lot, I drove away. So, my father cheated on my mother, and now he is being cheated on. Karma. Dad has called me a few times, but I haven't answered. I'll wait to see what transpires, as all I want to do now is confront Marissa about all of this. Should I? Update. Hello everyone. This is likely going to be my final update, I believe. I know it's a week later than you might have expected, but so much has unfolded this past week. Firstly, I actually gathered the courage to confront Marissa. I went to the house when Dad wasn't home, and Ash was asleep. I asked her if she had yoga class that day. She responded that she had it daily, even on Sundays. She was in the kitchen preparing pasta. I asked her who her yoga instructor was, and she provided a random name. I inquired if it was a male, and she laughed, saying, "No, why would I take a boy?" I then told her it was peculiar that she had a female instructor when the club she attended had no female instructors whatsoever. Her voice caught off guard, and her hands stopped stirring the pasta sauce. She insisted I was mistaken, but her demeanor indicated otherwise. I told her I had joined the club yesterday, and that's what they had told me. She then asked how I knew where her club was. I informed her that I had followed her during my last visit. She dropped the spoon. I picked it up, and she turned around. "What are you getting at?" she asked. So, I explained what I had witnessed. She denied it, as anticipated. I reiterated that I had seen it with my own eyes. She shrugged, stating Dad would never believe me. I then pulled out my phone and played the video, telling her he would at least believe his own eyes. She stood in shock, speechless for a full minute. Then, her expression softened, and she calmly resumed cooking pasta. She said it no longer mattered. She was already planning a divorce anyway. My eyes widened. This woman was truly contemptible. While my father certainly deserved this, she was undeniably manipulative. She then revealed that the man she met at the club was her lover of 3 years. They had rekindled their romance when it became safe to do so. She explained they had fallen in love long ago, but at that time, he was married to another woman whose father had hired him in his company. Much was at stake, but Marissa and her lover decided he should maintain his marriage and establish his finances, then divorce his wife and be with Marissa. However, Marissa became pregnant, and she became desperate to secure a partner for support, as women supposedly should. That's how she decided to stay with Dad. They had been seeing each other intermittently, but then Marissa met her lover and became pregnant. So she chose Dad and informed him he needed to take responsibility. She claimed he got cold feet, so she had to take matters into her own hands, which is when she spoke to Mom. Now, her lover is a widower and owns a company. She's all set. She concluded that women need to do what they must for their children and turned around with a smile. But her smile froze as she looked over my shoulder. It vanished the next instant. I turned to find Dad in the doorway, fists clenched and eyes red. He was visibly trembling. Then, Dad woke Ash and brought her into the kitchen. He asked her who her father was. She looked at Marissa and shook her head. She told him she didn't care about blood because she had always known him to be her dad. He ran his fingers through his hair and paced the floor. Over the next 2 days, Marissa and Ash were instructed to leave his house. The divorce proceedings are now underway. Ash and Marissa are currently staying at a shelter. Dad has asked me to find him a therapist and has apologized profusely. I forgive him each time. As for Marissa, her lover did not take her in. He denies having any contact with her. I possess the video evidence, and Marissa has pleaded with me for it. She has even asked me to consider Ash's pregnancy. What can I say, Marissa? Your child, your problem. What should I do? Delete the video or hand it over? I'll provide an update in the comments sometime later. Thank you for being with me for the suggestions and support. It means a great deal.